Hello everybody and welcome to H632. We have a lovely clouded I'd say it's a foggy day here today. It's not half bad. It's really warm considering it being late October, 30th October we're saying today. So, and because of the warmth we have some fog. Lovely day, it's light and bright, nice for a walk. Not going to do any walking right now anyway. Today's lecture, C632, is called Re-entrat Reality. The Return of Reality. And I subtitled it Dolbach. And I'd say to go further with the new tools we've learned from Bohm. It means that we got solution to problems previously unanswerable. And this is very important. They were unanswerable. It would not have mattered pondering. The tool of Bohm was necessary, i.e. it's not the only necessary thing, but it was definitely a necessary thing. But now it's a little bit like the gates are opening. It does not feel at the moment that there is any limit to it. So the previous, at least the previous 600 until 600, the little jubilee, the champagne, it felt like a constant limitation, some sort that I tried to break, we broke, and now it's just the opposite. It's opening up definitely from all directions. And I realize now that there is, to the further development, another thing, and that's internal more or less only, because we still have a difference, although the internal and the external is fundamentally the same. There are differences, because sameness doesn't apply to quantum physics as it does when it comes to classical physics. There you have sameness in all directions. You need to do as Holbach did. You need to take a very clear look at reality. And you need to be honest. You cannot put subjective wants, needs, prerequisites, wishes, I'd say. And I know this is impossible when I say it, so don't raise an alarm. We cannot get rid of our bindings because we are quite literally... Excuse me. I need to learn to turn the volume down. It's impossible to look into reality completely. We know that Heidegger mentioned that Freud was keenly aware of it, Jung as well. We cannot do that. It's simply impossible. It stops our thinking system. It's very good for surviving. It's probably a necessary trait for surviving, but in this instance it's not completely good, because we need to go further, and that means that we need to give up the bindings we have to classical physics. We are bounded by classical physics because we feel that gives us a safety, and we often combine that with wishes, wants, needs and other things. We want certain things from the world. But what Bohm is asking us to do is take a more objective look at the world And he has provided us with the tools for that. And in this transference, we would gain a lot more. There's no doubt with that about that. But we need to do this thing. So this is the first thing that in this lecture series that is not knowledge-based. Here is something we need to do. It's more a practical thing, or I don't know. Or we need a certain intention. We need to know also something good will come out of it. And I can say that for certain, everything good will come out of it. Quantum physics is reality on all planes. Bohm is absolutely certain about that, just like Bohr. The idea quantum physics should be only in the microscope is completely an invention from the Copenhagen interpretation. Nobody ever thought that. So we have false securities, and we have a worldview that was formed by what I mentioned earlier, the reflective consciousness, something that Carl Pribram talked about in context with Henri Bergson. You could also call it the left hemisphere to a certain extent to understand it is the one who doesn't see reality, not able to do that. For good reasons. But if we want to go further, we need to sort of look into our own wants and needs from the world, what we want the world to be. We have to look a little bit more at how the world actually is. It is, as you know, quantum physics is different from classical physics because it starts with observation, what we can know. We don't have a moon that nobody can see, perceive, or understand. And I would call these things stödhjul. I don't know what that's called in English, but there's those extra wheels you use when you grow up and learn to ride the bike. We don't need those anymore. That's fantastic good news. The little bad news is we need to get rid of them, and that can be kind of tough. We are beasts of habit. We cannot give up our habits even if they are diminishing us and making us smaller. And we need to take away those things to enable us to take in the surrounding reality in all its shades and tonalities. That is very, very important. We do not perceive anymore the immense richness of the world. The world is a big fruit garden, and by being stuck in the reflective consciousness, we say no to those things automatically. We don't know what we're missing out on. And this immense richness, this abundance, as Feyerabend calls it, is a richness, an abundance, a plurality that informs everything. And you will get a much deeper knowledge base for yourself, for what you want to do, for everybody else as well. So this is a definite opening. And I think we clearly established that in the previous 600th episode that we shut everything out. That's a state of fact. I don't think there's much discussion about that. Nobody serious within cognition science believe today that we are, for instance, rational. To believe that means being stuck in some sort of illusionary worldview. And that's harmful for yourself because all your decisions are no better than chance. They need not to be that. They can be informed by knowledge of the world. That immense richness, this profound primordial substance that underlies everything. Something that David Bohm called the hollow movement. The second lead here, you need this to mature, because when classical physics, we come to standstill. We come to a naive, childlike perception of the world. Yes, it's simple. Yes, it's like an imaginary friend. Yes, it's like a heaven on earth. Think about a nice place, as they say in the movie Dumb and Dumber, when the poor guy gets a knock on the toilet door and some hooligan wants to come in and wreck him completely senseless. This is what we do today. We are mind-wandering because we can't stand reality. But that, let me tell you, there's nothing wrong with reality. Reality is where all the good stuff is. And it's the good stuff we are shutting out. We locked ourselves out of the candy store, so to speak. Everything nice is out there. And by having this reflective consciousness ruling us, or the left hemisphere, we made reality into boredom. We don't move nicely anymore because we don't have any joy in movement. We don't have the intention because nothing is really fun like it used to be when we were younger, or a couple of centuries ago when people had the energy to walk all the way to Jerusalem or whatever they did. Take free boats and sail westward and discover new continents. We are bored in the culture, and we've been bored since the 18th century. That's amazing. The first tale of boredom comes in the 18th centuries. And it's no wonder. Classical physics is a nightmare. It's a maelstrom that drags you down, and it makes everything being the same. And it's sticky as well. And I want to talk a little bit about this stickiness. Something that Ian McGilchrist pointed out. It's sticky because it can't let loose of things. It sticks with things. And that's a common trait with the left hemisphere. It gets stuck in one area, one little detail. It can't let loose of it. And that's the purpose of the left hemisphere. It wants to find the seed, it wants to find the worm if you're a bird. But it's gone haywire, and we get stuck in a childlike mind. We have the childlike mind that forces us not to develop. We don't get anywhere. And Susan Sontag made this remark. It was concerning Swedish children, but maybe it applies to all of us who are stuck in classical physics. Swedish parents raise their children to be children and remain children. Immaturity gives immaturity. You need to be informed yourself. It is childlike to think that thinking is words. Thinking is a direction. It's an energy, needs to be directed. It takes the format of words, but the words are not the thinking, never ever. It's the explicit side of the implicit motion. And that can be very good to know, because when you let loose of that habit or idea that thoughts are words, you can also be much more flexible how you choose to word your thinking. You get the opportunity to control your thinking and put the words you need into the thinking, instead of having the sense there is a subtitle coming up in the head, and that leads you God knows where. And also, which is very, very obvious, that Yuri Havari, I think it's called. I'll try and find his name. Our language's gone down. It's more repetitive these days. It's lacking the beauty we saw in language among people only 50, 60, 70 years ago. We're using the same words, we use them in a very, very undifferentiated manner. And this is caused by the idea that thinking is words. Thinking takes the forms of words. It's childlike to think that words are the thinking. The third, and I think that's equally as important, you learn to see that the world is something greater, something bigger than yourself. It's not only your little needs, your day-to-day chores, what you want with your career and so forth. It's more. And this without giving up anything in the process. But think for yourself, wouldn't it be great to have a larger task in reality, something beyond yourself? Think of the intention you could get. Think of the inspiration you could get. Think of how much bigger every thought would be, and that thought encompasses the whole of reality, or part of it anyway. Something beyond yourself. Something much bigger than this extraordinary small reflective consciousness that is just limitations. It's the same thing over and over again. And you will be starting to grow in this process. You will develop your personality. You will develop your relations with others. Every encounter will be something greater. Your perception of yourself will as an effect be greater. But if you're stuck in the reactive consciousness, everything would be smaller for each time you react one more time. And in the sameness, there's no reality. The actual substance of reality is everything being different. Everything being new, different. And instead you are locked in the reflective consciousness idea that everything is just the same. Where it doesn't matter where I turn in the world, everything will be just the same. So this is a sort of a remark to the littleness that is in the reflective consciousness. This construction that also Richard E. Ling mentions, the head consciousness, the transcendent, nonsensical, somewhere other than reality existing consciousness that takes as its objects the things like the bodily impressions and owns them or disowns them, like having money in the bank. And it goes without saying that goes for a very, very limited knowledge. Almost a knowledge that's nothing, more or less nothing. It's based on limitation, it gives limitations. And you will make yourself smaller, much smaller than needed. And you also make yourself in that process physically smaller. We always do that. There's not a chance you won't make yourself smaller, that you will crumble up and you will forget about the backside, what's above you, because that goes hand in hand. That's the Klein bottle, but it's also implicit and explicit. What you put in some way is what you get. And I think maybe a good example of this is that in classical physics, what is perceived when you are in classical physics or room and time level 1 is that you think liberty lies in when you don't have any determinations. Liberty is where there are no rules. Liberty is when you can do whatever you want to. And this is a typical trait of feeling locked up, locked in by classical physics. It's a wish, and it's an impossible wish, because without determination you don't have any freedom. There's no possibility of creativity without determination. That's the prerequisite, something that De Bono pointed out. We cannot have creativity without a determining thing. There is unfreedom in undecidability. We lack freedom in that area. But we are so used to making complete lack of rules, complete lack of intention as something to be good. And that goes back all the way to antiquity, but it became very, very strong just after the Renaissance. And I think that's a telltale that you are stuck in the classical physics, which most of us are anyway. But it's good to know that telltale, that which Kafka had it. He dreamt his whole life that freedom was something unlimited, without borders, without an up or without a down. And that was, of course, the idea of the hippie movement. No rules, everything applies. And that's as contrary to freedom as you can come. Classical physics cannot decide what freedom is. Freedom is something greater, and it was something before classical physics, but it was never that which it became. It's a dream that takes you further into limitations. Maybe the last association can do with that. If you're thinking like classical physics, everything comes from the little one. The big ones seem to be more determined. The universe seems to be more determined, and society seem to be more determined, and rules and categories seem to be more determined. But that illusion is stemming from going from the small to the big. I think I mentioned before that Heidegger had a very good solution there, but also you found that in implicit explicit. Without the explicit determining things, observing things, the implicit will not be taken further and be able to spread out in all directions. A little like what happened after the 600th lecture here in our progress, in our process. And a fourth thing that I got into in the previous lecture is that to have reality means that you need to skip sameness. You need to go from sameness to the definitions. What is certain? Because you find certainty in the real world. You won't find it in the reflective consciousness. Reflective consciousness is complete relativity. Nothing is sure there. You could say it's pure unknowledge. Unknowledge or non-knowledge is no rules, no definition, no directions, no up, no down, no nothing. That's a state of ignorance. And that's a state of ignorance for the whole society. Classical physics has a backside, which is actually the same, and that's complete relativity. Anything goes. That's the society we're living in now. The little knowledge we have left, we throw it out like throwing out the kid with the bathwater. That's what we've been doing. That's what we've been obsessing with doing. in all areas. Yesterday I think we were speaking about the educational system, but it's quite as apparent in the political systems. We threw away possibility to make people more equal, possibility for people to get involved in the decisions that are made in politics. All those things has gone. We call it traditions, we call the bad things. We want this yucky, almost disgusting eradication of everything that is old, everything that's quaint, to sterilize everything. In Swedish politics it's gone way too far. Taking away one chamber, taking away all the sermons that lead to more contemplation, with more social interaction, all those things gone highway. You got a sterilized, awful political system. And my grandfather, one of the last ones who said about things that were stinking like the manure pile, it smells like democracy. That intuition is lost today. Quite contrary to other countries in Europe, democracy was forced on the people for a reason, to take away de gamla byalagen, medbestämmande, influence through the små kommuner, the little man's voice. Intentionally we took away it, replaced with democracy. And today there's so many people that think democracy is something nice. It is in Europe, yes, but it's not here. But for the classical physical mind, everything is the same. There's no difference in culture. There's no difference in histories. Everything is just sameness. And you can see how that blocks out knowledge. Because knowing the world is all about seeing differences. Without differences, there cannot be any knowledge. Similar to liberty. You can't have any liberty, freedom in yourself if there are no distances, there are no limitations, there are no borders. Those are the tools. Like we have tools in our body, in our body system. We have directions to make us strong. And those are not limitations. They make us strong and free and able to take action. But the people that forced democracy on Sweden were people who wanted people to be passive, obedient, receiver of political information, as Stellan Arvidsson called it. We don't want involvement anymore. We want them to accept democracy and receive the liberty like handed out to them. Well, you hear yourself. And of course, everything is done ex posteriori, after the fact. So when the decision is made, we can construe it to be coming from ourselves or from some democratic process. Ex posteriori, when the decisions are already made. The decisions are made in an implicit manner. It's not explicit. We seldom do decisions explicitly. We do it implicitly. And the politicians are acutely aware of that. That's what they still do. And they won't. It's not like there was somebody who thought that all this arguing about different things on the net in the newspaper would have some sort of effect. It's absolutely ludicrous. There is a reality, and words won't change the reality in that way. Perception can, the implicit can. There is a foundation to the world. We are not living in fantasy. Yes, we want to. That's another thing. I want to as well, but that's a completely other thing. And it doesn't even mean when I say that you should skip being in the fantasy. You probably get sick if you skip all your fantasies. But you need to soften them up a bit, because you will gain so much more. You will see reality, a firm ground to stand on, which you can feel in your body, not just say it all the time. I know I'm saying it now, but this is a lecture, I hope. But embodied knowledge is something completely different. It's coming from practice, and that's how, oddly enough, what many people think is completely theoretical. Science is a practice. It's something you do with your hands, you do it with your eyes, even to these days. The theoretical part is often the ones who can ex posteriori explain what happened, but that's a completely different thing. Do something in hindsight doesn't mean doing the actual science. Like, doing a decision is not the same thing as the explicitness of the whole thing. What we see in hindsight, the logical transference, where you start thinking, first that happened, then that happened, and then that led to that. Last example coming here. When you look at Roger Federer's playing Wimbledon, the Wimbledon game, as in the example of Roger Penrose, as of 3rd of August, not 4th, 3rd of August this year, in his fantastic speech on his 90th birthday, he mentions Roger Federer. He implicitly makes reality for every smash. It's not there before, it's not there after. But as an onlooker, you will construct a before and an after in a temporal sequence. That's how the explicit works. It should work, nothing wrong with that. But they're two different things. So I think that sort of roundabouts it. Thank you very much, and goodbye.